Happy Feast of All Saints. Today's a very special day for me and for this channel as we celebrate all the saints canonized and uncanonized. Today we're going to be talking about a very important topic to me personally and to many young men out there. We're going to be talking about the battle against lust and pornography, especially through the lens of Saint Benedict of Nursia. So fair warning, we will get into heavier subjects than usual. And also, even though we may take some things a little lightly here and there, understand that this is a very real problem that many of us are struggling with. So please take this seriously, and I hope you get a lot out of this video. Our Lord Jesus Christ once said, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you, everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and throw it away. It is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell." The Gospel according to St. Matthew chapter 5, verse 20 through 21. Now there's a saint that I would say took this pretty seriously, and his name is Saint Benedict of Nursia. So who was Saint Benedict of Nursia? Well, first off, he was born in Nursia in the year 480. Saint Benedict is the founder of the Benedictines and is also known for his powerful prayer and life, specifically against the forces of evil and the powers of Satan. Now, granted, one of the most common references to Saint Benedict is the Saint Benedict medal, which many of you guys have probably seen before. If you ever get a Saint Benedict medal blessed, I also encourage you to ask your priest to bless it according to the old rite, or at least to say an exorcism prayer over it. Because in the old rite, the prayer over the Saint Benedict medal includes an exorcism over the medal, which is very powerful, and it becomes a very, very great spiritual weapon against the forces of evil. So if you get it blessed, I encourage you to not get the stereotypical generic blessing, which many priests know of, but you may want to just say, "Hey, Father, can you make sure to do it in the old rite, or can you do an exorcism prayer over this Saint Benedict medal?" Fun fact about Saint Benedict, one time someone offered him a poisoned drink, and when Saint Benedict prayed a blessing over his poisoned cup, it instantly shattered, like it just blew up. Saint Benedict therefore becomes a very powerful intercessor for all of us before we eat, okay? So in case someone poisons your drink next time you go to the bar or something, make sure you invoke Saint Benedict and see if that glass shatters, okay? Another fun fact, even though he wasn't a priest, he's the patron saint of exorcists. And I think it has to do with his austerity of life and just the way that this man was able to really control his concupiscence, and his prayers became very powerful against the forces of evil. He also wasn't planning on forming or starting an order, but because of the fact that he gained a following and people really wanted to follow his spirituality and austerity of life, he ended up founding the Benedictines. So now let's get into the real meat and potatoes of this talk. How Saint Benedict combated lust. Okay, I think all of us are going to find this quite amusing, if not very seriously challenging. Here's a passage from the life and miracles of Saint Benedict, according to Pope Saint Gregory the Great. On a certain day, being alone, the tempter was at hand. Saint Benedict was assaulted with such terrible temptation of the flesh as he never felt the like in his life. A certain woman there was, which sometime he had seen, the memory of which the wicked spirit put into his mind, and by the representation of her so mightily inflamed with concupiscence the soul of God's servant, which so increased that almost overcome with pleasure he was of mind to have left the desert. But suddenly, assisted with God's grace, he came to himself, and seeing many thick thorn bushes, he cast his apparel, he took off his clothes, and threw himself into the midst of them, and there wallowing so long that, when he rose up, all his flesh was pitifully torn. So by the wounds of his body, he cured the wounds of his soul, in that he turned pleasure into pain. And from that time forward, he found all temptations of pleasure so subdued that he never felt any such thing. So what's the moral of this story? Sin is a very real thing, and it's worse than you think. Sin darkens our intellect. It makes us like beasts that can't control their passions. And I want you guys to reflect today on what you are willing to do to cut off or jump into the battle of your soul, to overcome the temptations that many of us may currently be struggling with. And if you're struggling with lust or porn, are you willing to take concrete actions in order to overcome your tempter, gain control of your life, and live in the freedom that God desires all of us to live as sons and daughters of God? Here are 3 ways that you can jump into, so to speak, the thorn bush with Saint Benedict of Nursia to overcome concupiscence, to gain control of your life, and especially if you're struggling with pornography, to get rid of porn for good. The first is talk to someone about your sin and your struggle. Obviously, the best way of doing this is in the confessional. Make sure you're going to sacramental confessions and saying the sins that you are committing, either in mind, word, or in deed. But also find someone that you can trust, who's maybe a good Catholic, who you know can take you seriously, that you can talk to about your struggles. Maybe a fellow brother who may be also going through that struggle and wants to overcome it. And that way you can have someone that keeps you accountable. And also it's a very concrete way of separating yourself from your sin and understanding that you are not your sin, okay? God knows your sin, but he calls you by your name. The devil, he knows your name, but he calls you by your sin. You are more than your sin. And talking to someone about your struggles can help you really make that distinction in a very clear way. The second is don't use your phone or devices in private. This is something I wish I would have been taught beforehand when I was struggling with pornography, which by the grace of God, I have not seen porn in over 6 years. Okay, I've overcome that temptation, but for a while I was struggling with it. And I wish somebody would have told me this. Don't go into your room with your phone. Don't go into the restroom with your phone. Don't go somewhere in private and start using your phone and hiding the screen away from other people, because that makes a very strong opportunity for the devil to tempt you. In fact, in the story of Saint Benedict, it begins by saying, on a certain day, being alone. Okay, so make sure as men, if you're by yourself, realize that the devil is going to try to take that opportunity to tempt you. And especially if your will is weak, your flesh also will try tempting you when you're by yourself. So try to use your laptop in your living room. Try to use your phone around other people. And that way you really weaken the effect that the devil can have on you. And you really allow yourself to realize, hey, I'm with other people. I shouldn't be watching this kind of content. And it keeps you in check in a very great way. The third and final way that each of us can jump into the thorn bush, so to speak, with Saint Benedict to overcome our battle against lust is make a resolution today that every single time you get tempted with a lustful thought, to recite a prayer against the thought and temptation. This, for me, by far was the most helpful thing that I ever could have done. I remember when I was struggling with these thoughts, whenever the thought would come, I made a firm resolution to say a prayer against it. The prayer that I learned was the Saint Michael prayer, and I encourage all of you guys to use it. The Saint Michael prayer is a very powerful, very concise, easy to memorize prayer that is also very powerful against the devil. Whenever I would recite it, almost instantly, the temptation would go away. Now, sometimes I'd have to repeat it a couple of times, But that prayer was very powerful for me and very helpful to take a concrete action against the temptation I was struggling with. And also because we're in a spiritual battle, okay? The battle against lust and concupiscence, even though it's a very physical thing because we are body soul composites, and as men, our flesh oftentimes becomes our downfall. It's also a spiritual combat against the devil. And so learning Catholic prayers, getting yourself spiritually fit through Holy Communion, through confession, and the sacraments of the Catholic Church is going to very much help you overcome these struggles. Now, the final thing I want to mention is the reason why God allows us as men to go through such temptations. This can be hard to understand sometimes. We ask ourselves, God, why do you allow me to struggle so much if you know how weak I am? God, first off, doesn't give us struggles greater than that which we can overcome. And secondly, God gives us struggles so that we can become the greatest versions of ourselves and so we can become saints. If we did not have temptation, we would not have a reason to get spiritually fit. We wouldn't have a reason to get our act together and to grow in virtue and to grow in the sacraments of the Catholic Church. It's much like a video game. In a video game, in order to get to each level, you have to defeat a boss, usually, or some powerful enemy. And every enemy that gets introduced into your video game, the reason why they get introduced is to help you learn a certain skill, a certain combination, a certain aspect of the game that will help you in the higher levels. And if you don't first defeat that enemy, that battle, that boss, you're not going to grow in that. You're not going to get those specific attributes. In this case, the graces. So every temptation that we have as men, it's like God putting us in a video game, giving us a boss and say, I want you to grow in chastity. I want you to grow in these aspects. So I'm going to allow you, I'm going to permit you to go through this temptation because I know that by my grace, you can overcome this. And sure, sometimes it's a struggle. For me, it was a daily struggle for years. But through that struggle, you get purified. Your resolution becomes firm. Your prayer life becomes concrete. And you become a saint. At least you start the path of sainthood. So happy feast of all saints, both canonized and uncanonized. Let us ask for the intercession of Saint Benedict of Nursia, especially today, for all of us, especially as men, who may be battling lust, trying to overcome pornography. Saint Benedict of Nursia, pray for us. God bless you. God strengthen you. Be the saint you're called to be.
Sancte Stephane, ora pro nobis. Sancte Laurel,